Okay, good morning, everyone. We are streaming this from the UPNA Summer Convention in Orlando, Florida. This is our first annual virtual Young Physicians Committee seminar, and we have chosen topics that have come up over the 6 months that we've been here with you. Side by side, listening to everything that you've been saying. So our first speaker today is Dr. Kamran Mirza. Dr. Mirza is an assistant professor of pathology and the medical director of molecular pathology at Loyola University Medical Center. He serves as the director of the pathology electives and the faculty liaison for the pathology interest group, Students Curious and Outrageous Pathology Experiences, SCOPE, at Stritch School of Medicine. He's a graduate of the Aga Khan University in Karachi in Pakistan. He completed his PhD training in the laboratory of Asrar B. Malik, PhD in the Center of Lung and Vascular Biology at the University of Illinois in Chicago. Completed his residency in a combined anatomic and clinical pathology, which I'm just learning exists as a new field, I guess, with fellowship training in heme pathology, thoracic pathology, and medical education research, innovation, teaching and scholarship merits at the University of Chicago. He's also the recipient of Pathologist in Training Young Investigators Award from the Society of Cardiovascular Pathology, the Society of Ultrastructure Pathology, and the Society of Pediatric Pathology. Dr. Mirza is joining us here because of his passion for teaching and penchant for education that have been recognized by numerous teaching awards, with most recently him being named Educator of the Year by the second-year medical students, which, if you all in Pakistan don't know, is a huge deal. And congratulations at the Stritch School of Medicine. So it's called the Paul C. Schreckenberger Teacher of the Year Award by the pathology staff. He also has been recently induced into the AOA Honor Society, and his dedication and work ethics have been recognized by MAGIS, Magus recognition, and for excellence as well. 2017, the American Society of Clinical Pathology named Dr. Mirza as one of the 40 under 40 honorees for outstanding achievement. After rigorous and competitive voting and selection process, he was named amongst the top 5 within the group as a potential leader in pathology and laboratory medicine. So with that introduction, welcome Dr. Mirza, and thank you for volunteering your time on a Saturday morning. And the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much. That was too kind an introduction. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Virtually, I wish I was there in person, or we were all meeting in person. Hopefully next time that can happen. I was asked to speak on professionalism, and I think that as far as like young physicians are concerned, it's something that I think that from Pakistan we are very good at, being professional. And I thought that it would be very interesting to talk about the idea of professionalism in the context of social media. And the reason for that is multifold. One is that I'm a social media nut a little bit. If you know me, I don't know if I know any of the audience members, but if you know me at all, you know that I am very big on trying to promote social media in medical education. And now what has happened, obviously, because of the pandemic and the fact that we're all virtual, is that social media has really come into play for many things, especially when it is about looking for residencies or fellowships and like establishing your brand. So I thought this morning we'll spend like a quick 20-30 minutes talking about how that may have changed the idea of professionalism. So, no conversation can start without a definition. So we know that the conduct, the qualities that characterize a profession, right? And the person in that professional is a professional, right? And the qualities of those individuals are professionalism. And the thing is that it's interesting that the rules are a little bit different. They keep changing depending on where you are, what your roles are, who you're speaking to. But if you really think about professionalism overall, it describes a certain type of behavior in a workplace usually, right? Because you're thinking about your role in the workplace effectively. And it's really based on the values and understanding that we have of that role, right? And so, for example, it could be that the value and understanding of a physician who is working in Pakistan may be a little bit different from a physician who is working in the United States, for example. The way we have professionalism, it's truly evidenced in our behavior. And I think that the most interesting thing is that it could be situational in nature, right? And so that means that, are you, for example, even if you don't think about medicine, let's think about being a cop, for example. If you're a police officer and you're at a bar, it depends on which situation you're in, right? Because the idea is that it's being judged but against a set of expectations or standards that society has for you, for your role. And for physicians, I can tell you that we all know that people really set their own set of expectations, which is based on their own value set, right? And so if your behavior or if your attitude is not in line with the value set that they think that you should have, that professionalism could be completely different. And then really it is truly influenced by culture, right? And so here we are, most of us, many of us, if not all of us, immigrated to this country, and we brought our own set of cultures, and now we're in a different set of cultures, and now we will be judged for our professionalism through perhaps maybe even a completely different value set. And so, we're judged on our image, right? We are judged on what we look like. Unfortunately, sometimes we're also judged by what's portrayed in the media. We're judged for our communication, right? This is what we always tell young physicians, that you have to be very good at communication. We're judged obviously at our competence, which is usually kind of secondary or tertiary, right? Like the first judgment is the first impression that you make. We're definitely judged by our demeanor, right? And then the idea is all of those things combined. How do you present yourself to your potential employers? How do you present yourself to your potential patients, peers, colleagues? From the patient's perspective, they are going to be looking at you for your trustworthiness, whether you are competent or not, right? They will be using their value set, right, or their judgment set to see how professional you are, whether you're empathetic, respectful, or caring. And so our relationship with our patients, which is not what I will be focusing on entirely today because I'll be talking about social media, it really is in a therapeutic context, right? So you need to be able to exhibit professional behavior, which gives them a feeling of safety and trust and ethics, right? So that those relationships have boundaries. We know that our patients are vulnerable populations, and there's an imbalance of power, right? When you are the treating physician, it is very likely that you hold the power in that room because you make the decisions. So professionalism then, in that context of being with a patient, is very important, to stay within boundaries. And then the question I guess we have to answer now is that with social media, let's say that you are now a physician on social media, and your patient follows you on social media. Maybe they're your Facebook friend. Maybe they're your Twitter follower. Maybe they follow your Instagram account. How have the boundaries changed, right? Are the boundaries now different? Are your roles different? Does it matter if you have a professional account or a personal account? Will they always see you as a physician? And then the question then becomes, if you think about patients, and actually, even if you think about colleagues, the context or the conversation around professionalism has to be around the needs of the relationship, right? The beliefs that your peers have or your patients have, the concerns they may have, or the values. And it's very important. And I'm going to keep coming back to this slide, because I think if we juxtapose ourselves into different positions of professionalism, all of these things remain the same, but then the situation changes, right? And when the situation changes, we know that situational professionalism might be a little bit different. So the idea is not to cross any professional boundaries, right? That is what professionalism would entail. And that seems simple, right? But it could be very complicated, for example, right? Where are professional boundaries? Is not dressing appropriately crossing a professional boundary? Is not using deodorant, for example, crossing a professional boundary? I mean, where are those boundaries? And they're all, again, in our cultural context. So, there are, if, for example, with the patient, for example, if you develop a non-therapeutic relationship, that would be considered unprofessional. If you had inappropriate communication, that would be unprofessional. Inappropriate self-disclosure, conflicts of interest, etc., exploitation by way of gifts and money, or breaches of confidentiality. Like, these are all kind of things that we know, right? And these are in the context of a one-on-one, in-person relationship for professionalism, right? And these are the things that, like I was talking to you before, these are the snapshot, first image impression that, you give off, right? And whether that's professional or not. So with that background in mind, let's think about social media. I would encourage all of our young professionals to have a professional social media, page or platform. It is extremely important to have that in this day and age because you will be recognized in many ways from that platform. And I have put my Twitter handle and my Instagram handle, it's scattered throughout the presentation. Please feel free. Obviously, we can chat in the Q&A. I see that there might be something in the chat right now, but I can't read it. But the idea is that if you use your professional network to communicate, to network with others, to potentially be visible to patients, right? There's so many influencers nowadays that are on, they're dermatologists on, Instagram talking about routines, etc. I mean, and they are presenting themselves as a physician. So then the question is, do the professionalism boundaries that apply to them apply in the same way that it would if you were meeting them in person? So we have this huge network, right? And as you found out in the introduction, I'm a pathologist. So I'm going to give you an example. When the pandemic started, the College of American Pathologists, and there's no conflict of interest. I was just one of the lecturers here. There was no monetary remuneration. The idea is that we started a lecture series online. It was called CAP Virtual Path, right? So that's the hashtag on the top left corner. And CAP Virtual Path basically went on for a couple of months. And take a look at these simpler numbers. We had 59 million impressions from a handful, a few dozen, presentations. There were over 15,000 tweets with over 1,600 participants. And that's a very, very powerful thing. And so what's happening now is that you are able to develop your brand from a platform that is virtual. Right? I mean, you are now talking to me, kind of interacting with me. I'm sitting in Chicago, you may be wherever. And the idea is that your branding that you have kind of created, whether this be your strategic goals, your marketing, the advertising for your own, for example, practice or for the group practice or for your university, this has now primarily shifted to being social media based, right? So a lot of marketing is happening like that. And this has actually become even more important in the era of social distancing, right? So for example, for the young physicians who are still looking for, residency positions, you may, all signs are that it's going to be another virtual interview season. So then how does that professionalism that we were taught, right, in medical school or, in any other type of education that, sit straight, have eye contact, make sure that you dress in a particular way, make sure you wear deodorant, etc. How does that change now that we're going to be virtual? Does the professionalism change? So social media really has changed the rules. And if you think about professionalism in general, we've always thought about what you say, right? The way you say it, right? These are the things that kind of, we have to think about. What you're doing while you're saying it, right? What words you're using, what you're wearing, how you're smelling, etc. But let's think about it in the context of social media. So normally we used to say, use courteous and welcoming words such as good morning, greetings, how can I help you, right? I mean, even if it's your patient, definitely helpful words that are encouraging, etc. Does this social media change this? Do we still use courteous and welcoming words? We definitely do, right? Do we avoid impersonal or negative language like, oh, I was too busy to do this. We're definitely short-staffed. This isn't going to happen. Like, these are all words which are factual. It's not that these are not facts, except that when we think about what we're saying in the context of professionalism, the rules haven't changed. So even when you're on social media, the fact that you should be courteous and use helpful, positive words, that has not changed. But then let's talk about the way you say it. Normally, we were told that, face-to-face communication is extremely important, and it's really most of what you're going to be talking about will be through the tone of your voice. So let's think about face-to-face communication. I'm going to do something weird right now. All right. Let's see. Does this look very professional? I'm not even looking in the camera. I'm looking on the side. I don't even know what you can see, right? This isn't professional anymore. So being aware of where the camera is, right? Trying to look into the camera, is that the new way of being professional? It certainly is, right? I mean, we were always told for the people who took step 2, the clinical skills exam, come in, wash your hands, shake the patient's hand, etc. It was the same for interviews, right? For young physicians doing interviews, you had to walk into an office, shake the person's hand. You were nervous and everyone was shaking. I remember that time. And then you go sit on the chair and then you look at the person. So now how does that change if it's going to be virtual? We talked about telephonic communication and how the bulk of your message will be through the tone of your voice. So while the rules are the same, the tone of your voice, do you come across as being a very kind of shy person? The rules are very different. I mean, it was hard enough in person, but now sometimes you have a computer barrier, right? You have a video barrier around you. And so you have to even go a step further to try and prove to people who you are or, what you represent. Are there ways to improve your tone? I did an audio check. I hope you can hear me like properly, but these are the kind of electronic things that professionalism demands. What you're wearing is different, right? You guys don't know if I'm wearing jeans underneath or flip-flops, right? Because all you can see is basically my torso. And so that has changed. The professionalism of like what you're wearing has completely changed. And then even afterwards, right? Even afterwards, when you email communicate, and that I will talk about a little bit, because I think that is somewhere where a lot of us go wrong, right? What words are we using? How often are we emailing, right? These are all things that you have to consider when you think about professionalism. And what you're doing while you're saying it, right? So the first one was what you're saying, the tone you're saying it, and then what you're doing, right? Are you fidgeting? Are you looking everywhere? How your facial expressions are? And this is kind of awkward. I think nobody enjoys looking at themselves in a screen. Like when I have a Zoom meeting, I actually turn off my own like visual because I don't want to necessarily see what, me talking back to me. But you actually almost, if you're interviewing, you should probably record yourself and see what you look like. Do you have a resting face that looks very stern? Like I have a very stern resting face. You can ask my children. I can come across as being very like aggressive, and I'm actually a very positive person, and I'm technically not aggressive. But many of my students have said this as well, that Dr. Mirza looks very grumpy, right? And it's not grumpy. My face is just naturally kind of in a way that looks aggressive. But see, when I think about my professionalism, I have to take these things into account. Do I have a face that kind of is a little bit more aggressive? I could possibly use that in positions of leadership if I ever was to get into them. But if I'm trying to be very kind or communicative with a student, how does my outwardly body language or facial structure or facial expression change? Right? Posture and proximity, right? How close were you sitting to the camera? Now it's all social media. How close are you sitting to the camera? Are you far away from it? Are you like too close to it? And how are you gesturing, right? Like my hands are moving. I normally move my hands. You can probably see my shoulders moving, right? But in social media based or virtual based professionalism is a little bit different. So it's all really still about your appearance, right? So here I have mentioned things such as ID badge, etc. This is more for stuff where you're in person. But the idea is that all about your actions. Everything now in the context of social media, especially if you're interviewing, for example, virtually, all of those things will be different, right? What you say needs to be the same. The way you say it might require a little bit more gusto and a little bit more energy. What you do or what you wear while you're saying it is basically kind of, it's probably similar, right? You need to have eye contact. It's very important. And, you kind of need to have some gestures which are important. What you wear is still important, but maybe only partially, depending on what type of interaction you're doing. And, for those people who don't like to wear deodorant, there's really no excuse, but at least for social media, it doesn't matter how you smell, right? And so the professional judgment that's happening will still be through your image. It will still be through your communication. They will be gauging your competence, but it'll be virtual, right? Through social media. And it'll also be in your demeanor. And what's very important is the same rules. You have to respect the patient, your peers, your employer's needs, their beliefs. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, their concerns and their values, right? Because you are bringing your resume to the table and you have to be able to market it in the most appropriate way possible. And it needs to be done in a way which is the most professional that you can kind of muster up, right? And remember, it kind of sounds very defeatist to say this, but it's more like, to put a little bit more pressure on it, that, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, right? And it's kind of cliche to say, but it is important in the context of professionalism. So let's think about organizational policies, right? So like a lot of people think that, well, having tattoos is unprofessional, having piercings is unprofessional, right? But a nose ring in South Asia is very different from a nose ring in the United States, for example, although things are changing. So when you are presenting yourself in any professional setting, and you kind of want to come off as professional, please review your organizational policies, right? There could be a dress code policy, right? It could mean, what types of shoes you're wearing. I'm a pathologist, for example, going into the laboratory, I cannot wear open-toed shoes. It's just part of my professionalism, part of my code of conduct, right? Obviously, think about what your organization thinks about body piercings, smoking, etc. And actually, because it's a social media based talk, often you'll find that social media policies may not be in existence, but if they are, you need to follow them, right? So as a big proponent of social media, I would find it very difficult to work in a place that had a very, very restrictive social media policy, right? So those policies usually are that, well, be careful when you're on social media, be careful not to represent the university because, you're representing yourself, right? So usually the simplest professional thing that you can do is just say that my opinions are my own. Kind of sounds redundant to say it, but people do. You can say things like, my opinions may not reflect the opinions of my employer. And for example, for all of us who are seeing patients, you have to be careful that tweets or posts may not represent medical advice, for example, depending on what types of things that you post about. So if you are not on social media, or if you are on social media, let's kind of review how you can get it right. Many people actually advocate for keeping your personal and professional space separate on social media. I do that. My Facebook is for friends, cousins, dost yaar, and my Twitter account and my Instagram account are for teaching, for example, or sharing cases in a de-identified fashion. So I've tried to keep those separate. That way, if you're a cricket nut or if you're a politics nut, you don't have to kind of mix business with, pleasure. Private options of social media accounts are definitely present, right? You can have a private kind of restricted social media presence, but that really does limit your audience. And so if you're trying to create a professional platform for networking, right, and truly being out there, truly representing what you do, and this probably was more for me because as a pathologist, most of you know that a lot of people coming out of Pakistan, they don't necessarily choose to become a pathologist. And I want to tell everyone about the career and how amazing it can potentially be. And if I limit the number of people I'm interacting with, that can be an issue. But the first step in professionalism is to get started right? And so my recommendation to you, and this is obviously not set in stone, my recommendation would be to keep your professional social media accounts separate from your personal ones. So we talked about your image, right? So these are going to be kind of silly things, but it's the truth, right? Your image is how you start your professionalism. And so that in social media is your profile picture, right? Please don't be a bot. Do not keep your profile picture empty. If you don't want to put your real face in it, put some other decent thing, right? Be representative of who you are. If you can find a professional shot, all of us had one taken for ERAS, right? Or for NRMP. You just use that one if it's still in date, right? If you don't look very different. Make sure that it's a professional shot in a professional setting. Now, many of you can say, well, this is my own social media. I can kind of make it whatever. That's entirely up to you. But I'm speaking specifically about professionalism in social media. Your image is also carried forward by your Twitter handle. So I'm going to focus on Twitter handles because Twitter is, kind of the way I like to word it. And so, kind of keep it unique, right? So instead of saying Annie, for example, if you're a pathologist, maybe you can say pathologist Annie, right? If you want to say wild and crazy Annie, it's probably not going to be very professional. So you can say Dr. Annie MD, right? And instead of saying Annie, the greatest living cytopathologist alive, you should probably say Dr. Annie Cyto, right? So a lot of my examples are pathology based because I figured that why not put a little bit of pathology in the YPC Apna conference, right? You continue on and your profile is very important. So here I'm showing you the profile of the College of American Pathologists. Dr. Godby is the president at the moment. The profile and your bio should describe who you are. It should have the hashtags and the handles of affiliated organizations. And this is a way to be professional because that will allow you to follow and for others to engage in your account based on your credentials, right? So we're not following you necessarily because of the beautiful pictures of breakfast that you take, right? We're following you because, let's say, you are a rheumatologist who is, giving some factoids about joint diseases, etc., or you are a representative of your hospital, and that's basically, kind of what, what your discussions are. Don't be a robot or a bot. This is not a good example where you have everything empty. You can follow thousands of people, but nobody will follow you back, because if you don't have any social media posts, if you don't have a bio, if you don't have a profile picture, in many ways that could, it's not unprofessional, so to speak, but it isn't truly doing anything for your professionalism either, right? Definitely personalize your profile. Personalizing your profile, this is Phil. He's a pathology resident at Mayo. He's one of my Twitter friends. I've only met him through Twitter. That's the power of social media. I haven't really met him in person yet, right? But this is a great bio, right? And so here you can describe your interests if you want to. It's no harm in like kind of putting that personal touch to it a little bit. His handle is very unique. It's PathoPhil, right? So he's a pathologist. His name is Phil. He put that together very nice. He at that time was an M4, and he spoke about where it was. He said that his hashtag was he's a future pathologist, and he at that time had 740 followers. Now I think he has over 2,000. So he's interacting really, really nicely. So we move on from your image to communication. All right. Let me tell you something about communication. I lost a residency because of a visa delay. It was a long time ago. I don't want to talk about it. But at the time, I emailed probably 1,000 people to try and get a research job. So I can tell you that I totally know, for those young physicians who are struggling, what it's like to have to email kind of spam email. But there's still some rules, all right? There's still some rules. You can, please be very directed and write appropriately to the right person. Don't copy paste everything. The bulk of the message can be copy pasted. But I will judge you. I can tell, right? When I get those emails, I totally know what's happening because my name is written in a different font from the rest of it. It's a no-brainer. I know that you haven't really thought about who you're sending the message to. And that to me is very unprofessional, okay? For example, we have an online pathology elective, right? I run this elective. And in that form that you fill, I get like 400 applications a day. It is impossible for me to reply to everybody. And so I've put in the Google form that if you do not hear from us in 3-4 days, you probably have not been accepted. We do not have the bandwidth to email you. Only those people who have been accepted will be contacted, right? This is my way of saying, listen, guys, I don't have a way to reply all to everybody for 400 applications a day. But then guess what? I still get this. This was recent, actually. It was this past Sunday. Sir, when shall I expect email for virtual observership? I had sent application, please let me know. Dude, you're probably not going to get it. I mean, this person actually had gotten the virtual elective. But this is super unprofessional. I've already told you as part of the application, please don't contact us, right? I mean, there is a mechanism to do it, but if you don't, then that's a problem. Communication is key. And second of all, this was a Twitter direct message. What other mistake has this person made? They don't have a profile picture. I can't even recognize who they are, right? Their professionalism is not being leveraged the way it could have been leveraged. Title, right? It's very kind that they called me sir. But am I Dr. Kamran or am I Dr. Mirza? Frankly, I don't care, right? Having grown up in Pakistan and done medical school in Pakistan, I know that in Pakistan, people would call me Dr. Kamran. In America, you don't say Dr. Kamran. In America, you say Dr. Mirza. Will it make a difference? Probably not. Nobody really cares. I personally don't care. But is there a chance that somebody would care? Then if there is a chance that somebody cares, address people appropriately. And this is still about communication. In the United States, and now creeping across the world, is the idea of preferred gender pronouns, right? So if you are unsure of someone's gender pronouns, be very careful, ask them what their pronouns are. Teaching medical students now, I put my, him, his, her, all of those pronouns in my title so that they feel comfortable in their communication, and it's now part of professionalism. So, if you are going to use examples, please don't use masculine examples all the time. Mix them up. Think about the other people in the room, right? If you are going to give an example of a leader, please don't give us an example of a Caucasian surgeon who's a man, right? Like these are parts of your communication that will make you more professional. And also be very, very, very familiar with offensive terms. There are some words, okay, I learned some of this the hard way. There are some terms that we use in Pakistan very, very, casually, and they are not offensive in Pakistan, okay? But they can be offensive in the United States. So please be very careful. One or two come to mind, and because I'm sitting in the United States, I don't want to say those words, but in Pakistan, I could have said those words pretty easily, right? Anyway, one word is about, like, for example, patients with, psychiatric conditions or, cerebral palsy. Like there's a word that we use for those people, and like that's just a horrible word. You can't use it. Anyway, the point is that you have to be careful about offensive terms depending on where you are. And the reason for all of this is, again, going back to that slide that I showed you. Professionalism is really pointed towards the needs of who you're working with, their beliefs, their concerns, and their values, because we are trying to be respectful of their needs, their values, their beliefs, right? Because as physicians, we are servants to the people in that sense, right? And this is the type of servant kind mentality in a good way that we've brought from Pakistan, which many people here may not have. But I think our professionalism, especially in the light of social media, kind of demands that we stick to those rules, right? We can. No one is saying that you bend your own principles, right? You have to stick to your principles, your strengths, your faith, your vision. That's all good. But we can still find a very nice space where we can be professional, but we can also, stick to who we are. So I can't finish a talk without talking about social media's dark side, right? Because I always, propose it and I, kind of back it up. There are HIPAA rules and they apply to social media, right? So be very careful. For pathologists, it's a little bit easier. It's easier for me to de-identify a histologic image. For example, I can use one from the archive, right? If it's a pleomorphic adenoma from 2010, it's the same pleomorphic adenoma look in 2021. So it's not a big deal. But, if you're be very careful. Don't post pictures of patients, even if you have asked them for their permission. Like a lot of people post those and they say, oh, permission given, but be careful of your organizational policies, right? Does your organization allow that? Remember that posts are forever, right? Even if you delete them, somebody might have snapshotted them. We know through politics that there are many politicians who have deleted stuff, but then you can still find them. The world will be watching, right? So the professionalism that you're showing is not now the professionalism in one-on-one in an office. It is now your professionalism in front of the whole world, right? Remember, and this may not be fair, but remember that, if you're a Muslim, you are representing all of Islam. If you are a Pakistani, you are representing all of Pakistan. This may not be fair, but many times it happens that there are excellent foreign medical graduates who go into a program that has never taken foreign medical graduates before. And because of their excellence, you find that the trajectory changes and that program takes more and more and more Pakistani graduates, right? The opposite also happens. If you go in and you do a horrible job, then after that, you may be your unprofessionalism or your inability to be professional in that setting or work in that setting may close doors for people who are coming after you. And, really have common sense. Be very careful about controversial topics. I know we get very passionate about sports and politics, but if you've curated a professional social media presence, be very careful what you're tweeting or retweeting or what you're liking. You can do whatever you want. I'm not saying that you change your beliefs, but be very careful that if you are thinking of maintaining a professional presence, you may not want to alienate people. Having common sense is super important, right? Don't date things if you're posting it. This is more for patient-related things. If it's very unusual, right? Like for example, the patient that you're presenting has the only cardiac tumor in the whole world of that type. Please be careful, because even if you don't take their name or their age, people will find out, who they are because of the fact there's only one case in the world of it or something. In many cases, I don't even like to put ages. For pathologists, it's easier, right? I can just say this is a middle-aged person and this is a skin biopsy, right? It doesn't matter what, in many cases, age matters in medicine, I know, but then you don't know the gender, you don't know when they were, presented, you don't know their age. So how will you identify them? So just be very careful when you're posting. The other dark side that I want to talk about is, a lot of people ask, well, somebody posted a horrible comment, or they were very, very, demeaning and disrespectful. What should you do? This is a very tricky one. And people criticize me for my answer. I actually say that you should not engage trolls. Don't engage them. Nobody wins in social media fights. You can have all the ladaiyan with your aunts and uncles Facebook page, but nobody really wins. It's not a fight that, to be honest with you, I've seldom been able to educate somebody on social media in a way where I have been able to make a difference. Now, then the question is, do you just ignore them, right? What if it's a matter of principle? What if they've said something religious that you're not comfortable with? So then you have to make a personal decision. You have to make a personal decision for what you believe in, what you stand up for. Can you use your professional social media presence for a political movement or for a social movement, right? Do you want to tweet about Black Lives Matter? Do you want to tweet about, pride? These are all personal things that you will have to decide for your own professional presence. And this is how I do it. If I believe in something very strongly, or if my principles align with it, I actually don't mind that I tweet about it once in a while, because I found that if my social media presence can influence others to do good, then that's great. I know a lot of very professional, very successful people who don't engage at all, meaning with other kind of social constructs of things other than medicine. And I know people who are very, very engaged and polarizing, okay? So you have to, from a professional presence, define where you stand on that spectrum, right? So stick true to who you are. I'm not saying change who you are. I'm not saying weaken your stance. I'm just saying that think about it as young professionals, where you want your career to go, what things will aid that, and what things will come in the way of that, right? And so then you can make your decisions. So I think I'm kind of out of time. So we have some time for question and answer. But if I was to summarize, I would say that professionalism, the rules of professionalism, the core rules are still the same. But the fact that we are now much more social media active have changed the context of those rules. So you have to remember to keep that in mind, as you go forward in your career. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mirza. That was a wonderful talk. I don't know about others, but I learned a lot, and I took the liberty of updating my Twitter profile while you were telling us what should or should not be there.
That's awesome.
So I will follow you. Yes. So we do have some questions, and this is the season where, especially for international medical graduates, they're trying to reach out, trying to create network, get guidance. So we have a couple of questions about creating a network through social media, especially with the pandemic, where we and just your thoughts and guidance. And actually, I'm going to hold off on this for a second. I just realized we have another panelist, and I want to welcome her. And she has a few minutes that she'd like to talk as well, and then we'll get to the questions. I apologize. So Dr. Noorafsha Khan, classmate from Aga Khan, and also a wonderful primary care faculty at UPMC Mercy Hospital, internal medicine primary care program. She's also a specialist in obesity medicine, and has been basically teaching since residency. So I say that because I know she's a teacher as a resident, and she's been teaching for about 20 years now, every day. So Dr. Noorafsha Khan, do you have any comments to add regarding professionalism? And then we'll get to questions.
Thank you. First of all, that was a great talk, and I will echo what Dr. Jamshed said. I kind of learned a lot too, and I think I need to work on my Twitter profile and not be a robot. I think I'm a partial robot. All I have is a couple of really old posts and just my picture. So thank you, Namira, for the introduction. So as Dr. Jamshed mentioned, I would like to share my perspectives on professionalism beyond social media. As a medical student from Pakistan who came to the US, did her residency, and then joined the teaching faculty at UPMC. So one of my roles as a faculty member at UPMC with the ambulatory medicine division is that of not just teaching our residents, but also evaluating them and making sure that they are getting the training that they need and that they deserve in order to be successful physicians in the future. One of the things that's stressed immensely during your training over here is going to be the 6 core competencies that you are required to develop expertise in. And one of them, a very important one, is professionalism. As a faculty member, my perspective is that there are so many other things, medical knowledge, even interpersonal and communication skills that you can kind of learn. Professionalism is something that has to come from within you. Professionalism is something that you have to recognize and respect and engender and entrain in yourself. So the talk was excellent, talking about social media presence and professionalism. But some of the things that I would like to just touch on briefly is what we are doing with our patients. So you can think of professionalism as doing the right thing at the right time in the right way, and engendering that trust that you need to have between yourself and your patients in order to provide them care at a very vulnerable time in their lives when they're sick and when they need help. So professionalism is something that we take very, very seriously because our basic premise as physicians is that we are trying to help our patients. And if we are not able to relate to them in a way that respects them and values their opinions and their independence in the decision-making process, we are not going to be able to provide them the care that they need. And a lot of what we do as teaching faculty is really looking at our trainees and seeing how they're doing and giving them feedback. And any feedback that you get, I would suggest that you strongly consider of it. And I think of feedback for myself also, that feedback is a gift. So it's a gift that's being given to you, and you should be able to receive it graciously, whether it's coming from your patients, whether it's coming from your colleagues, whether it's coming from your family members or your teachers, and then really work on that to try to better yourselves. So as trainees in the US, professionalism is going to be a very important element of your training and the expertise that you're going to need in order to be wonderful physicians in the future, taking care of your patients and really enjoying the work that you do and having this sense of fulfillment from this I feel very privileged to be a doctor because the respect we get from our patients, from our colleagues, and from everyone around us is just tremendous. And I think it's basically a privilege, and we need to respect that. So I think I'll stop right there. I'm sure there's some questions.
Thanks, Dr. Noura. Yeah, professionalism in the US is a core competency. So let's get back to the questions, both for Dr. Khan and Dr. Mirza, if I may call you that since we're here. So let's start with reaching out to physicians, attendings, or faculty over social media. Dr. Mirza, why don't you start, and then we can see if Dr. Khan has any comments.
Sure, absolutely. So I love Dr. Khan's point. I'd like to start there about, professionalism being a core competency. It's, it's intangible, right? I mean, it's, where with medical knowledge, you can take a test, right? And you can be like 60%, 70%, but professionalism is something that is a perception almost, right? And so it's so important to tie it back to that. And so thank you very much, Dr. Khan, for that point. So, all right. So reaching out to people on social media, this is it's a gray zone. All right. Let me tell you about your access to them. So in some cases, you won't be able to message them, right? So for example, if it is Twitter and my direct messages are off and I don't follow you, there's no way for you to kind of send me a direct message. So that automatically answers the question that you can't reach out to me. Now, for example, I have my direct messages on because I don't necessarily want to follow everybody. Not that I'm mindful, I follow thousands of people, but I still want people to reach out to me. But if my direct messages are on, like you can, I don't follow you, but my messages are open, you can message me. I would not mind. Would other people mind? If they mind, they will probably have their messages off, right? So let's just start there. So Twitter direct messaging, if it is a professional account and you are coming with a professional question, I would be okay with it. That said, though, if I don't reply, please don't keep harassing that account, right? So harassment on that account, I think, is where you would draw the line. Facebook is very tricky. Some people have Facebook profiles that are professional profiles. So it'll say, Dr. Noor Afshar Khan, and her professional title. And then if you have an ability to message them, then you can, on a professional way, message them. But for example, if you find my Facebook, it's Kamran Mirza, went to Hson College, went to Aga Khan University. These are my wife, my children. And if I do become your friend, then I have opened up that ability for you to contact me. But if I don't, please don't message professional messages on a private, or I would say personal Facebook account. And lastly, I think the question had talked about LinkedIn. LinkedIn, of all of them, I think, is probably the most professional account to kind of talk about, because people on LinkedIn are usually there only for professional purposes. They aren't technically there to share pictures of food, or it's not like Instagram for that matter. So if someone is following you on LinkedIn, or if you can send them a message, I think LinkedIn would be the safest. Second would be Twitter with direct messaging on. And I would stay clear away from Facebook or any other kind of personal Instagram thing. If you can find their email address, if it's accessible, you can send them an email. But I guess my biggest concern would be, don't border into harassment of email, like one message, and if they reply, great, good job. And if they don't, kind of back away. Dr. Khan, would you like to add anything?
No, I think that's great. Absolutely. If you are not getting a response with the forum that you have chosen to reach out, I think it's best not to just keep pushing. That actually looks really unprofessional. And I completely echo what Dr. Mirza said about LinkedIn being the most appropriate professional forum for you to be reaching out for these purposes.
So thank you very much for that answer. I have a question. Most recently, in my role as a chair, I receive a lot of emails and messages. A couple of things I've noticed. Graduates or students have accounts that are separate from their personal accounts. So you can't really tell who they are. So the names are different. Somebody calls themselves USMLE, somebody calls themselves something else. There's no personal profile, so you don't know who you're talking to. Any thoughts on that? As in, it's a graduate, it's a student, they have a reasonable question, but you don't really know who you are responding to. Dr. Mirza?
That's a very good one, Dr. Jamshed. So I guess this is my personal bias. So now I'm not speaking on any authority. I'm just talking about anecdotally what I feel. If you're anonymous, there's something wrong with that, right? I mean, the fact that, why is it that you have to be in a, so if, for example, if it's a very sensitive question, right? And, you don't want, for example, if they're asking you that, I borderline passed step 1, I really, truly want your answers, and they don't want to necessarily put their name there, maybe I can understand that. But if it's a very regular question and they have shrouded themselves in anonymity, like it seems a little bit off to me, like to the point that it does seem a little unprofessional. If you are reaching out to me, for example, when they reach out to you in your role as chair, right? That is a role, an authoritarian role, and you're asking a professional question. I think it behooves them to at least identify who they are, right? I mean, even if their profile is USMLE or whatever, they can at least end this thing by saying, my name is Dr. Kamran Mirza, and I'm reaching out to you personally. So my person, like what we talked about, It's a personal set of values and beliefs. So I personally believe that if you are anonymous for a thing that you really truly want to keep secret, I'm happy with keeping your confidentiality. I'm not going to I'm not going to force you to tell me your name, but I would be happier if you came across as being more open. I think that will only give you a benefit. For example, even if somebody has failed step one, and then they passed it, and they reach out to me and they're honest about it, not only will I keep it confidential, I will actually help them more because I will know who they are, as opposed to if I don't know who they are, then I may not care that much.
Thank you, Dr. Mirza. I believe we don't have any more questions. I'm actually, we have, I can open it up to live if anyone has any questions, if you want to raise your hand, even from the panelists for Dr. Mirza before we end and take a break. So any hands? Oh, we have one from, all right, Dr. Mohammed Yushe Jawad. I am going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Hello, thank you so much, first of all, for this wonderful presentation. I'm Dr. Mohammed Yushe. I am from King Edward Medical University. I'm its recent graduate. So I have this question that I've been working as a remote researcher with a US professor. So it's been quite a few months, like we have been conversing with each other over emails. Now that I have shown my professionalism, I have produced a few papers with him. I want to talk to him about my career goals because he's a very big researcher and I need to discuss either I want to be a clinician or a clinician scientist or maybe a full-time scientist. So what would be the best way to fix a call or maybe some one-on-one meeting? Is it even professional to ask about it if I am working with him for like 6 months? I would like to have answer on this, please. Thank you so much for all your help. It's wonderful to have you people.
So I can take that and I'm sure Dr. Mirza may have something to add. So the way I would do this is because I do work with trainees and residents and research and things like that. Most of us who are in the teaching business, most of us who are working with younger physicians, we love to give back. We love to mentor. So I don't think that there's any issue with a very respectful, professional way of asking if the professor would consider mentoring you and helping you further with your professional development. But then also to be mindful that the professor may have many other tugs and pulls on the time they have and what they can commit to. But you already have an existing relationship. This professor knows your work ethics. And if this is something that you feel would help you with further mentoring, but go into it with the right intention, go into it with the intention of trying to develop yourself professionally and seeking really to gain even more from the expertise of your professor. And that's what I would recommend.
I completely agree. I think that, I love the way you share that you approached even the question, right? You were thoughtful, you were almost tentative, and you want to think about it. And the fact that you have insight, right? I mean, it would have been a problem where you were like, well, I already have a relationship and I can do whatever I want. Like you were thinking about it. You're thinking that, okay, I've already spent 6 months with somebody and I can gently ask them, and like just the way you approach it to us, I think would be the right way to approach it to them. Just like Dr. Khan was saying, leverage your relationship and say something polite like, we've worked together for 6 months and I would really like to use your, this opportunity to be mentored by you. Would you have a few minutes whenever you're available, right? And then take it from there.
Thank you, Dr. Mirza. And we have room for one more question from Dr. Faisal Qureshi. Give me 1 second, Dr. Qureshi. I will unmute you. Go ahead, Dr. Qureshi.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much, everyone, for your time. I really appreciate it. This means a lot with, you guys are sitting down and giving us your time and your expertise. Really appreciate that. Thank you. So real quickly, my question was, so on LinkedIn, I'm looking to, network. I'm looking to get out there and show my face because I have several, my profile is not the best. I'm trying to bypass the filters and trying to build connections, networks with attendings and programs and faculty members. And so I'm really interested and passionate about advocacy and mental health and emotional health. And so in middle school, I used to do something called Man on Street, where we would approach people in school and do interviews where like video and give their feedback and like talk about PSA or like common things like bullying or stress, anxiety. So I kind of want to do that with mental health and emotional health. I really want to see how people, what the common people think about that, especially with the pandemic. And I really want to put that on my profile and because I want to try to go into psychiatry. What do you guys think about that? And how should I approach it? I want to be professional at the same time. I want to put my own creativity into it. I want to definitely try to put my ideas, values, and views, but not be biased. And what do you guys think? I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your question, Dr. Qureshi. Go ahead, Dr. Mirza.
Yeah, so first of all, congratulations. Sounds like a fantastic project that you did, right, when you were younger. That's wonderful. So can I ask you, Faisal, before you mute yourself, sorry, is that currently, how is that already present? Are those videos on YouTube? Is there a website for that endeavor? Like, do you have, how have you packaged it?
So recently we went on, I have gotten some videos. We approached several people from different backgrounds, different age groups, and asked them about some common questions in regard to mental and emotional health. And we have the videos. I'm thinking of putting them up on YouTube maybe, or directly on LinkedIn. And then we've also asked the people if they have some privacy concerns, we could blur out their faces too. But no, like we didn't ask for anyone's name or any direct details.
So, this might not be the answer that you're looking for. But this is what I would do. If I was in your situation, I would actually create a website.
Okay.
I would create a website with that, whatever title you have for, your little endeavor, and describe who you are, what you do, what this project was about. And then in it state very clearly that, you have consent from these, patients or these, individuals on the road, etc. And then kind of create a tab where you say video 1, video 2, video 3, for example. And then what you should do, and, it isn't very expensive to create a website, to be honest with you. Like all you need is, you just little expertise. If I can do it at my age, anyone can do it. So I recently made one. And then I would say the professional way to promote it would be to promote that site. You could be like, my name is Dr. Qureshi. I am an advocate for mental health. I'm looking to become a psychiatry resident. Please, I would love feedback on this project that we did. Check it out here on the site. And you can absolutely post the videos also. But then, like, for example, I have 1,000 questions about this, right? So I will click on your website and I will look at your, for example, this is who you are. This is what your mission was. This is, it could actually serve as an online CV, an online resume. So you can leverage that. But if it's kind of in the ether, right? If it's just some videos randomly put together, but in your mind, they make sense. I would use a platform for it to make sense. And so if it's not a website, for example, you can create it as a Facebook group, right? Create it as a Facebook group, mental health on the street, whatever you want to call it, right? And then have the videos there. But you should be able to link to it so that if people have questions, they don't have to constantly ask you, they can kind of see what you are. That's how I would market it.
That's great. The one thing I would add to that, Faisal, is that make sure that you always use what we call patient-first language. This is something that I don't think we're exposed to a lot in our training in Pakistan. I don't know if it's any different. But what we mean by patient-first language is really respecting the patient as an individual and recognizing their individuality before recognizing their disease or disability. So, for example, saying an obese patient is not good patient-first language. So a patient with obesity or a psychotic patient would not be considered very professional anymore at all. But, a patient with a name what the diagnosis is. So just be aware of using patient first language in whatever online presence you create, because whatever you put out there is going to be there forever and it's going to be discoverable.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, we're going to end here. I'm sure that if you have more questions, you can email them to me at ypc@appna.org. I will forward them to Dr. Mirza, and if he has time, he will respond and we will share those with you. Really appreciate your time, Dr. Mirza and Dr. Khan. Very useful pearls of wisdom and guidance and advice. And good luck to all
Thank you for the
those who
opportunity.
attended, and we'll get on to the next talk. Thank you very much. Okay, so for our next talk, we have, it's my privilege to introduce Dr. Abdul Wahid, who is actually advisory on our Apna YPC committee. Dr. Wahid has a long list of things that I would love to share, but then in the interest of time, I'm going to try to summarize. He's a graduate of the Aga Khan University from the class of 2005. And what I did not know about him until he joined AKU Alumni Association and our committee is that he actually worked in Pakistan for a few years before he came to the US for residency training. He's currently the program director at WellSpan. He did his family medicine training at Penn State Hershey Milton S. Hershey Medical Center. He's a program director at WellSpan Good Samaritan Hospital in Lebanon, Pennsylvania, and clinical associate professor of family medicine in Philadelphia osteopathic medicine as well. He has a special interest in capacity building and research and scholarship, as well as faculty and resident academic development in low resource and community hospital setting. Prior to joining WellSpan, he successfully developed alternative models and novel approaches towards faculty and resident academic development in collaboration with Penn State University College of Medicine in Hershey, Pennsylvania. He is a frequent speaker at regional and national forums, including the ACGME Annual Educational Conference, Society of Teachers of the Family Medicine, and Pennsylvania Academy of Family Medicine. I am going to conclude here because we will otherwise spend the next 20 minutes talking about Dr. Wahid's credential. We are honored to have you here. Thank you so much. Please go ahead. Dr. Wahid is going to talk to us about mentorship today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jamshed. Let's not talk about stuff that would just occupy time. Let's get to the business. I really appreciate you introducing. All right, so mentorship and advising something very near and dear to me, and I have worked quite a bit. Two themes, if I would say, lifelong in my career conception is the first one is actually capacity building, and second one is related to mentorship and faculty development, which kind of the same theme. So it was hard for me to come up with something that I'm going to share like in a very short span of time virtually. I've given several workshops on these topics, and they're lengthy, they're hands-on and in person. So please forgive me and pardon me if it comes across very sweeping and a lot of stuff shared in a short span of time, but I'll be available for questions afterwards. So I'm going to introduce a lot of concepts in a quick snippets and quick span of time. So I'm going to try to share my screen for a second. Okay, so let's move this here. All right. So we're going to start with our learning objectives of this session. Is by the end of the session, I hope that you'll be able to define and describe the difference between a coach, advisor, and a mentor. List 4 forms of guidance and their common application in advising residents or learners. Identify appropriate form of guidance for the specific learner need. So we'll start first with the 4 types. And with the 4 types, first one that I have is advisor on top. And you can see the advisor is usually appointed by an authority and has a job which needs to be accomplished. As opposed to if you go to coach is focused on a specific skill or task and is not usually appointed. It's usually learner initiated. So learner has a need or a specific task or skill that needs to be built and approaches the coach. So it's directed by the learner. So a small difference. And then coach with wisdom is something, something that comes in between coach and mentor. Mentor is mostly driven by the mentor. Mentorship relationship is driven by a mutual agreement between the mentor and learner, and there are repeated exchanges. Similarly, advisor is focused on a specific event or is usually an expert in the target area. The way to think about that in common real life examples is a consultant that we hire to do something. If it is, the needy driven or the learner driven or the advisee driven, is you can think about a patient, going to a consultant or a physician to seek help. Or appointed by authority. For example, we have all gone through schools, medical school or otherwise, we get a faculty advisor appointed. And the purpose of that is that program appoints advisor to ensure that the learner will graduate and finish the task as expected. And they are experts in that target area. And the general approach is advisor would give advice or answer the learner questions. And it's usually for single session or time limited. So it's usually cross-sectional. If you were to look at, from analogy of cross-sectional studies, cohort studies, so this is your cross-sectional as opposed to mentorship relationship, which is cohort. It's longitudinal, it's long-term. And the coach and coach with wisdom comes in between. Coach is focused on a specific task or skill, and usually is not a subject matter expert. This is coaching industry is now increasing leaps and bounds. You can see a lot of leadership in different industries would hire coaches for single individuals, sometimes even for the boards. The coach is there to observe and then give advice. And usually the coaching model, we'll talk about that in one of the future slides, is focused on helping the learner discover himself or herself, rather than saying, okay, I know it all and I'm going to tell you how to do it. And so coaching approach actually asks more questions than giving answers. And there's usually no direct benefit to coach from the activity. So coach doesn't develop with the coachee, the person who is seeking the help. There's indirect benefits, as I said, some people hire coaches and they get paid. That's their profession. But there's no direct development benefit directly to the coach from the activity. Coach with the wisdom is something that falls in between coach and mentor. And focus here is against task or skill development, but there is now some long-term view of the field. And the coach here is coaching, but also has some experience and expertise in specific performance target area that you're trying to develop from the activity. And it's mostly learner directed and combines coaching and mentoring. And maybe some benefit to coach from the activity. So your coach kind of develops itself because coach is from the same field and has experience, so would benefit directly from the activity to some extent. And we see that coach with wisdom is a lot of the stuff that we do when we're teaching medical students or we're teaching, residents. I'm coaching them. At the same time, I have some experience, more than them. And when I'm teaching, I'm learning from them. So that's something benefit that comes around. Mentor is focused on career-long or lifelong experiences, and usually expert in the field. And usually the way we say, has been there and done that. Mentor and learner directed, the activities for mentorship is directed by both mentor and learner needs. And there are repeated exchanges. Many times mentors have specific curricula that they go through, and they have specific things in them, their mind, steps that they would want their mentee to take, and they will walk them through. And it's mutually beneficial to both. And you can see that the best example is, research mentors. I've done research in certain area. I've developed expertise. I know the literature. I've done some stuff on ABC, and now I want to advance it to D. I'm going to have a mentee who's going to work to advance this from C to D, and I will help that mentee to go through. Moving along, coach, console, or advise. It can be an approach as well. So these are paradigms. And then as you go, it can be approach or a skill set or a form of advice that you can give. And it can be coaching, consoling, or advising. And there are different scenarios where you actually choose out of those. No matter whether you're a mentor, whether you're an advisor, or you're a coach, you would choose some of these advice forms. So we came from the relationships to now advice forms. And advice forms is like you can you can advise, you can coach, discipline, or mentor, and you'll be choosing from consoling only for negative experiences of the learner. Emotional toll for some reason, something happened to the learner, and you would provide consolation or console them. And there are different phrases that you can use to console. But the best approach is listening. So careful and eager listening is very helpful in consoling. And help use some phrases which are going to help the person express more and get it out. For example, you might have experienced this, seen psychiatrists or psychologists sometimes use, or you might have been taught something like that in your medical school, where you would ask, how does that make you feel? Very open-ended. What's on your mind? Open-ended questions, and let the person express. Accidental or situational mistake or human error is another thing that you would want to console the learner. Coaches, very different, and you would coach for events where learner desire to gain a skill, but is lacking the skill, and there's desire to gain it. Or at risk, you're an advisor for a resident or a student for a specific program, and you're trying to help the learner to get from point A to B to graduate out of that program, and you identify an at-risk behavior. You want to coach your learner for that at-risk behavior. We'll talk about that at-risk behavior paradigm in a few minutes in future slides. Advise, you would use when your learner is failing for certain requirements for the program. And you would advise, for example, you have resources that you want to give to the person. This is similar to, prescribing medication. You have a patient, you identify the diagnosis, and this medication is going to work, and you prescribe. So this is your prescription. As opposed to coaching, you can think about behavioral change. You diagnose someone with diabetes, here's your metformin. That's your advice. And coaching is identifying, the need that your patient has to change lifestyle, has to stop eating refined sugars, and how you're going to get that, and asking questions from your patient, asking your patient questions, how do you do it, and how are you going to do it? Motivational interviewing is a coaching technique, and some of you might have heard of that. Discipline is, again, if you're in a position of authority, for example, your advisor, or you have other position of authority, then discipline is another way of is another technique in the coaching, consoling, and advising. And that's done for reckless behavior with repeated intentional risk-taking. We'll talk about repeated intentional risk-taking in one of the future slides. Mentoring is mutual interest and expertise, mutual growth, and we talked about research already. Scenario one, we'll talk about, you're asked by your program to help with the resident who's behind the total number of cases required to graduate from the program. Very straightforward. This scenario requires an advisor relationship. Scenario two, one of the students approaches you to express interest in your research work and would like some guidance. Very clear. This is going to be mentoring relationship. You volunteer to Upnav IPC to provide prospective residents clinical experience in your practice. This is going to have a combination of coaching and mentoring. So you are coaching with wisdom. So these are three scenarios that are clear cut, that you can utilize one paradigm or one form of relationship than the other. Coaching to discipline framework actually involves what people call just culture technique, and just culture goes through some concepts of human error. A lot of the things happen because of human error, and then there are at-risk behaviors. A common example that's used for this is signal light, green, yellow, and stop, red light. So red light, for example, someone is trying to cross a light and is within that hard white line where you actually push the brakes and you're going to stop and you'll still be not in the middle of the section. So, and someone makes a judgment error and says, "Oh no, I'll be able to pass," and goes and in the middle of while the person is in the middle of the section, the light turns red. So that's a human error in judgment, right? However, once this is done, next time the person comes back on the light and sees, "Oh, I'm going to look at each side and there's no one, despite the red light, I'm just going to go." So it was the at-risk behavior for this person because misjudged. Anyone can misjudge the distance. Now the signal was red and somebody took intentional risk. So that's intentional risk-taking. And at-risk behavior should be coached. Human error should be consoled. And repeated intentional risk-taking is called reckless behavior. So that should be disciplined. For example, if someone, always is looking and seeing, despite this being red, I'm going to take my risk and go because no one else is coming. Some examples here would like you to kind of think about these. A learner who has been shadowing in your practice for 2 weeks and pulls you on the side to express concern that he accidentally left the door of the refrigerator open. He's distressed about his mistake. So, just think about it in your head. So this is somebody who made a mistake. It's a human error. So you may want to console this person. And then this is probably at-risk behavior for this person as well. So first you will console and then you'll coach, ask question, why do you think that happened? And what would you do in future for this? And and once the learner comes up with 2 or 3 things that this is what I would do, then you would ask, how confident are you that you would do A, B, or C? And in confidence, sometimes you can ask them to even rate them on a scale 1 to 10, 10 being, this is going to happen. This is it. You're going to do it. And if they say 5, you would ask them, why not 7 or 8? Why did you rate 5? And they would tell you, oh, yeah. I have barriers. So you'll come to know the barrier. You can coach them through the barriers. So having those questions handy can help. And I usually have a workshop where we go through scenarios and we ask questions and do some role playing, but I'll keep moving along. A learner who has been shadowing you on hospital service and helping you care for a patient comes to you devastated that the patient died overnight. This is clear-cut consolation. And you want to start with open-ended questions like, what's on your mind? How does that make you feel? how are you feeling? How are you doing? That kind of question. Let the learner, express what the concern is. A learner who has been shadowing you in your practice looks and opens looks by opening confidential electronic health records of several of your employees. Now that's something. The question would come in on our part is to see whether the learner actually went through HIPAA training or not. Does the person understand HIPAA training or not? So your first thing would be you sit down and ask those questions, whether you know HIPAA or not, and how much was the risk taking here. If it is several records and several employees were affected, then, seems like not only intentional risk taking, it seems like intentional risk taking on multiple counts. So that's reckless behavior, and that should be disciplined. I'm going to talk now, transition a little bit more to mentor now that we have talked about different coaching techniques or different advising techniques or different forms of advice, to say, different forms of advice that you can choose from. Who's a mentor? Mentor is a wise and trusted counselor. So mentor is going to use advising, coaching, consoling, disciplining, all of these forms of advice, and it's longitudinal and more like cohort. If you were to think in epidemiologic studies frame of mind, this is longitudinal and cohort. And in academics, mentor is often used synonymously with faculty advisor, which is not true. These are two different roles. Sometimes faculty advisors can become mentors for certain things because, they're advising the resident or the student or the learner. They develop a close relationship, and, learner becomes interested in the faculty advisor work and becomes mentor-mentee relationship. A fundamental difference, mentoring, advising more than advising. Mentoring is a personal as well as professional relationship, and an advisor might or might not be a mentor depending upon the quality of the relationship, as we talked. A mentoring relationship develops over an extended period of time during which students' needs and nature of the relationship tend to change. A mentor will try to be aware of these changes and vary the degree and type of attention, help, advice, information, and encouragement that he or she provides. The nature of a mentoring relationship varies with the level and activities of both student and mentor. In general, however, each relationship must be based on common goal to advance the educational and personal growth of the student. You as a mentor can also benefit enormously. Students, for their part, need to understand the professional pressures and time constraints faced by their mentors and not view them as merely a means or impediment to their goals. For many faculty, mentoring is not their primary responsibility. In fact, time spent with students can be time taken away from their own research or some other stuff that they need to get done for their own selves. Students are obliged to recognize the multiple demands on mentors' time. So any learners on here, just this slide is more relevant to you guys. Now, a little bit of a fun before I end and we go on questions. There was a rabbit one time, and we're just like, what next? Research, hard work, direction. Here comes a fox and says, how about having you for dinner? Well, please wait. Let me finish my research on wolves and until I write a paper. What is that research about? It's to show that rabbits are superior to wolves and foxes. And you want me to believe that? That's true? I can show you if you come down with me. The wolf went down the rabbit and never came back. Here comes another wolf and asks like, hey, what's happening? It's like, oh yeah, I'm doing research. What is that research about? That research is to show that rabbits are smarter than wolves. It's like, and you want me to believe that? I can show you if you come down with me. Down they go in the rabbit research lab and doesn't come back. Another rabbit comes back and says, so what's up, doc? Doing research, writing papers, trying to prove that rabbits are smarter and superior to wolves than foxes. Want to see it? Come down to my lab. Down they go in the lab. That's what they discover. The moral of the story is the title of thesis manuscript doesn't matter. The subject doesn't matter. The research doesn't matter. All that matters is who's your mentor. So don't be silly. I'm not growing carrots. I'm trying to attract rabbits.
That's excellent. Thank you, Dr. Wahid. That was excellent. I enjoyed those slides. So I know we have a lot of people on the talk, but we have some panelists as well. And I wanted to give them an opportunity to see if they wanted to add something. Dr. Shagufta Jabin, do you have anything to add to what Dr. Wahid has shared with us?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I think so. This was an amazing way of describing all about the mentorship, advisory board, you know, and also the wisdom which goes along with the actually nurturing a student, as well as providing a nurturing environment where they can grow professionally and personally. And most of the medical schools, as well as residency training program, they offer some advisors and some counselors, as well as some mentors, you know, from the beginning, so the you know, students can shape up early on. So I would say that look into your med schools, you know, as well as your residency training programs to find those people who can actually help you grow. Because to me, it's a lifelong learning, you know, you need mentors throughout your career, throughout your life. And having those, you know, you will find yourself in some kind of situation where you have to have somebody who can guide you through that, you know, hurdle which you are going through. So when you are in this process of getting residency into the USA, I think so this is very critical time where you need to have someone who can coach you, guide you, advise you in various, you know, steps which you have to take and go through. And it is also going to provide you not only a, you know, professional sport, but also a, you know, personal sport also. So you need those people in your life. I would say that stick to one if possible. You know, make a good selection who will be the best person for you. But if you want more than one, you can also, you know, get advice from different people as well. And our, you know, young physician council is also doing a lot of mentoring, etc. So you can also come to us and register for different programs which we are offering. So we can help you to grow.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jabin. Dr. Mohammed Siddiq Quran, do you have any comments?
Thank you. Very great talk by Dr. Waleed, and kind of echoing the same things here. We are here to for you guys. So if there's any need, and as you can see, this YPC is working in such a vibrant way, in such a great way under the leadership of Dr. Jamshed. So we are doing every possible things, and we are help you mentoring and any special need. This is one of the most diverse, you know, committee that we have. As you can see, we have, you know, volunteers from pretty much all the specialties. So any kind of help we would, you know, love to provide. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Khurram. Dr. Numan Ashraf, you have any comments?
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, so first of all, a great talk. And there was a comment in the last session also, and I'll relate it to this. People were asking how do they connect with supervisors, with mentors. So again, YPC is one platform, you can do it. But also the best way when things are not working out in your virtual world, and you're like, so whenever you find any in-person opportunity, that is a great way to connect with people, find mentors. So like we had this Apna conference, any other meetings of Apna, those will be great. You would find people who are program directors, people who are associate PDs, who are professors. You can connect with them face to face and then do the networking. But also, like for psychiatry, I can say through APA, American Psychiatry Association, or for program directors, there's ADPERT. So if you go to those meetings, or even if you email those people, go to their website, they have the mentor requisition form, fill it out. They can also assign you mentors. So you're not just limited to even Apna. You can even, if you know that you want to end up in psychiatry, those professional organizations are there. You want to end up in medicine, AMA, find out when their meetings are. And if you find in-person meeting that's happening, that would be the great way to get started with it. But we are here. Just shoot us an email if you need to find a mentor, and then we'll help you as best as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for a great talk, Dr. Waheed, and the panelist input. I have a couple of questions. I mean, I think starting off with our role as mentors or coaches. And Dr. Waheed, for you, how do we decide, or if when someone is reaching out to us, whether we will be coaching them or mentoring them?
That's a very good question. I think the first thing would be to understand what the learner need is. And, for example, I sometimes get questions directly about family medicine. And I put my hat on as a mentor because, I have done that. I've been there and done that. And I would give them specific advice how to approach family medicine residency. Sometimes people would ask me questions generally about gaining residency. And now I would be coaching with wisdom because I've done residency, but I've not done all residencies. I've done only family medicine residency. So that's coaching with wisdom. And sometimes people would generally ask me questions about career, and then I would be coaching them. And in coaching, you're just helping them answer their own questions, what they want to do. And if you let me share screen, I have some helpful question formats that I usually share with my faculty and we can share it afterwards with the group here. There's a format that we use, is called GROW. And GROW is for goals, G for goals, R for reality, O for options, W for way forward. And this GROW format can really help. Like, for example, at the outset of the encounter, you can help, this is dedicated time that you're you're spending with the person who's asking you questions. You can ask, how would you like to spend your time together? Our time together, you're talking with me. What are your needs? What's on your mind? And what's important about this to you? So some open-ended questions, some examples. And reality is bringing understanding to the current state. What is the current state? What is point A from where the person wants to get to point B? And some open-ended questions. Similarly, what were the factors that determined your decision? And what is happening now? What is the effect of result of this? So, and I was talking about on a scale of 1 to 10, how urgent is this situation? So using the scales can be really helpful and make the learner really think about it. And options is encouraging to explore other alternatives and some open-ended questions again. And then way forward, which options work best for you and what do you think you're going to do? And what will blink, asking a one scale of 1 to 10, how committed are you to taking the agreed upon actions, and what will bring it closer? So that's something could be used, a GROW mnemonic or GROW format to determine what the learner's need is, whether you would be coaching or consoling. If somebody is working with you in a specified environment, in your practice, and you agree to sort of have the person work with you in the practice, then you're basically doing mentorship, and for the most part, because you know your patients and you've done that, you've been there, and then if this is your own practice, then you probably have to think about that there might be a time that you might think about disciplining as well. And disciplining in the sense would be that you would clearly set the expectation and say, you have to do this and you have to demonstrate this. If you don't do this, then it's not going to work out.
That's excellent. I think for us, I see, for example, mentoring more of what we do at YPC when someone reaches out to us and getting them through. But coaching example, Dr. Ruba Fahim, who's also our committee member, last year did these mock interviews. Would you say that that is more of a coaching example, or is that doesn't even fall with that into that?
That's usually advising. It's like
advising, okay.
Consultation, and it would use a combination of the advice forms, where you would give expert opinion about something. It's almost like patient coming to us and seeking advice. So that's mostly advising, and that's an excellent activity. And as a mentor, you would be using advising many a times.
So I'm already putting my chair hat on and thinking that we need a workshop next year for us, so that we can learn to coach and mentor all these wonderful young graduates that reach out to us. Are there any other questions for Dr. Waheed or any of the panelists?
I just want to say one more thing. One of the example in psychiatry is that sometimes patients only come for the sport or the counseling, like, supportive therapy, because they go through a crisis, versus a long-term, several sessions of cognitive behavioral therapy. So we can, at some point in time, the applicants may need just like a sport. And on the other hand, they may need a long-term kind of thing where they have to do their homework also, and when they are coming to us, for mock interviews, etc., we are also doing assessment of them. Based on that assessment, then we are giving them advice that, for example, your body language was not what is recommended, what program directors are looking in the body language. I did not see that in your mock interview. So we are actually giving them some advice in that sense. So I just wanted to add this.
Thank you, Dr. Jameen. And I know Dr. Amar Javed is here. And for those participants who have joined us, we are working on a mentor-mentee program, and Dr. Amar with other committee members are finalizing. And we hope that we will go live with that program in a few weeks so that we can assign mentors based on your needs. Dr. Amar, do you want to say just a few words about that? And I think then we will end early before the next session with you and Dr. Kosa.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Jamshed. So we are in the process of setting this up. In the past, I think there were many informal pathways. People would not have a set structured platform to reach out to folks for mentorship. And the UpNow YPC has decided that that is going to be something that we're going to dedicate our time and efforts to. And we're interested in setting up a formal system where you can send in your applications, they'll be reviewed, and then we'll potentially match you to mentors who fit your interests and their interests as well. Now, one thing I would like to add to Dr. Waheed's talk is that when you consider a mentor-mentee relationship, it's a two-way street. And while all parents will tell you that they love their children equally, there's always a favorite one. And when, as mentors, you adopt these children as your own, the person who has the most conducive relationship with the mentor is the one who has their time, has their love, has their support the most. So when you get into this relationship, treat it as an investment, treat it as a bond, and think about what you are giving back to that relationship as well. Because if you both can grow together, then that would be the best relationship you can have. And that way your mentor will be really dedicated to your career.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Javed. So we are going to end here a little bit early. Our next session is at 11, so exactly in 20 minutes. So you guys have 20 minutes back. And we will come back with both Dr. Amar Javed and Dr. Faisal Khosa. They're going to talk about research, and we'll open it for questions, and we hope to end on time at 12 p.m. today, Eastern Standard Time. So I look forward to seeing everyone again. It looks like we may have a question. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. We're going to answer this question since our participant is asking. So Dr. Usman Shah is asking, what is the benefit to mentor, as said, mutual interest? So Dr. Waheed.
Yeah, so mentoring relationship, for example, you know, I have mentored recently a resident on a research project, and the research project was advancing my career conception. For example, I've been interested in developing ways to increase capacity in research, right? So his work brought another publication, and I'm part of the publication, right? As senior author, the mentor is usually the last author. You see the senior author. So that is the mutual interest. And then it's answering the question of the broader research area that I have. So my mentee's question answered one small component of my broader set of questions. So I got my answers, my research got advanced in the same area or the same paradigm. So that's the benefit I got from research. So this is a most simple way of understanding the benefit to the mentor. Mentoring in clinical practice, many times I actually learn from my residents. You know, I would ask them a question and they were like, oh, I went to so-and-so specialist and told me this. I was like, oh, really? Let me look it up. So I look it up. It's like, wow, you're correct. So that's the mutual benefit.
Thank you so much. That was actually an excellent question. And I think sometimes we forget that we seek mentees when it serves our interest as well. And maybe like Dr. Javed said, they may get a little more attention from us because there is mutual interest. All right, so we'll end here. And if you have any other questions, just as before, please email them to us at ypc@appna.org, and we will respond to you. We look forward to seeing you all again in 20 minutes. Thank you very much.
You have a basic science career with an independent lab, which collaborates with clinical partners who are interested in translational research. Now, in contrast to that, translational research involves applying discoveries generated during research in the lab, clinical trials and studies in human beings. And what the aim of this sort of research is to enhance the adoption of best practices in community. And this is a definition that was taken by this program at the NIH. And I think translational research is unique in the sense that it's very dynamic. I mean, you can search the web and you find a bazillion definitions for it. There's no clear-cut definition, but it's very dynamic. And based on the table I showed you earlier, where you go from the cell to the community, you can basically find your niche, and that would define what kind of translational research you will be doing. What comes to mind when I think about a career pathway in translational research is that after medical school, you should think about pursuing a postdoc. And then following your postdoc, you will go back to your clinical training. And there's always this potential of taking some time off during your clinical training to do some more research. And then as you go into your clinical fellowships, a lot of people would start putting in grant applications that can support their academic career. And then as you go through this whole training process, you start establishing relationships with potential partners in basic science. So this is the reverse of a basic science career. And then what it looks like at the end of the day is clinical practice with collaborators and academic career in translational research. Now, clinical research, we can have many different goals or types of clinical research. It could be aimed at a preventative measure, so finding new ways to prevent diseases such as hypertension, diabetes, or it could be for screening. So can we screen for certain diseases? A new novel tool that was developed in the lab that's coming into practice now. You want to see whether it's applicable in clinical medicine in diagnosing diseases. Therapeutics, so novel drugs that have been developed in the lab, do they really work? That brings them to clinical care. And then lastly, quality of life, which looks at improving or finding ways that can improve the quality of life in patients with chronic diseases. And when I think about this, this is something that we, at least graduating from Pakistan, are most familiar with. And I think in this particular pathway, it's really not necessary, though encouraged to take time off from medical school after you graduate. But what you can do is you can do a lot of that learning and you can get those skill sets during your medical education at your medical school. And then you go into your clinical training. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you can take some research years, go back to work with a PI who does clinical research, or you could pursue an MPH or a master's in biostats. And then during your fellowship, again, medicine or academic medicine is driven by research funds and grants, so therefore applying for those funding in the long term, but your focus on clinical research would involve using retrospective data sets or institutional registries. You could focus your research on large data science using national or international registries. And then you can also involve yourself in clinical trials, which somewhat overlaps with your translational research. But if you're very clinically focused, you can, or you're answering clinical questions, you can design some clinical trials on this as well. And then that brings me to global health research or public health. And this is the area of research and this is a priority in improving health and achieving health equity for all people worldwide. And this but based on my observations, the general track they follow is to pursue an MPH after finishing medical school. Sometimes they go into clinical training, finish their residencies, fellowships, while some of them will realize that they want to pursue a purely academic career and they establish themselves in a school of public health. And then the long-term goal of this particular pathway is to become a research faculty at an academic institution and become a thought leader in one of the fields or subspecialties of global health or public health. And now these two are fairly unique. So medical education research, this includes evaluations of the transfer or acquisition of knowledge, attitudes, or skills in any topic that's relevant to human health. And this could include health professionals, students, and patients. And what it generally focuses on is teaching patient care, teaching medical knowledge, patient-based learning and improvements, interpersonal and communication skills, system-based practices and professionalism. So current, even junior physicians, how to improve their clinical practice and their training. And generally speaking, this does not involve taking time off. What you really need in this particular career pathway is to find a mentor who's well established in medical education. Some of these folks do go ahead and pursue a master's in medical education, But in the long run, these people are going to have a clinically heavy career with a focus on medical education. And these people often end up being program directors of the residency program or end up advancing to leadership positions in a medical school. And then lastly, health administration research. There are a bunch of things that these folks address. The first one is risk management. How do you develop and design policies that reduce and promote secure workplaces? How do you manage information? I mean, in this current world of AI and digital information, how do you improve your IT? How do you improve the collection of medical data and protect the EMR? And then there's financial administration. How do you reduce the costs and improve the income of your employees? How do you maintain your institution? And then healthcare policies, which involve working with the government for regulations and healthcare legislation. And people who pursued this particular career pathway, they initially start off with a research fellowship or an internship with a hospital administrator. And this could be either during clinical training or before clinical training. And they often end up getting a master's in health administration or an MBA. And then during their early career as a junior physician, they will find themselves a mentor. It could be the department chair, could be your provost, could be your dean, and they sort of learn and progress under their wings and sort of grow into what looks like this career pathway where it's a clinical practice. Sometimes these people will sort of take a step back from clinical practice. It depends on the bandwidth you have, but generally these people will take leadership roles such as a chief of a department, go on to become deans of a school or a provost of an institution. So next, I'd like to move to a series of manuscripts to demonstrate the impact of research on clinical practice. And full disclosure, a lot of my work focuses on basic science and translational research, but I chose a few of our manuscripts from my group that were clinical in nature so that it's more relatable for you young clinicians. So these are three manuscripts that we published in 2016, 18, and most recently in 2019. And it relates to surgical site infections in patients undergoing a pancreatic duodenectomy. So the first one was based on an observation that the rate of surgical site infections remained high despite improving multiple operative techniques and patient care in the perioperative period. And the mortality was improving, but the rate of infections remained high. And most recently, with more aggressive operations, the rate was actually increasing. So the first thing that you did, or we did, was to perform a retrospective study to figure out what's going on and what patients are at high risk. And we found out that those who received neoadjuvant chemotherapy or those who received preoperative biliary stenting were at a high risk. So now we know that there's a high risk cohort and there's a low risk cohort. So what do we do with the high risk cohort? And then we did another retrospective study. Around that same time, there was some interest growing in negative pressure wound therapy. And we found out that, yes, there was, in fact, an association between negative pressure wound therapy and a reduced risk of surgical site infections. So how do we bring these findings to clinical practice? We needed more evidence and more high-level evidence, so we designed a randomized control trial. And lo and behold, we found out that in the high-risk cohort, there was a 70% relative risk reduction in the rate of surgical site infections. And when looking at the costs associated with it, it led to a median cost reduction of around 25%. So not only were we improving healthcare for these patients or improving their quality of life post-operatively, we were also reducing the healthcare costs. So based on these studies, a couple of more institutions followed suit. They validated our findings, and this is where we stand right now. Many national and international guidelines have now incorporated the use of negative pressure wound therapy as a quality metric in patients undergoing pancreatic duodenectomies. And it is now being utilized for a majority of these patients, at least in the US, and now being adopted globally, and has resulted in a significant decrease in surgical site infections. So what I really wanted to show from these 3 studies is that sometimes small observations and some thought process followed by medical research can lead to great changes. I mean, this small thoughts, small observations can have a global impact. And when a lot of us in medical school think about medical research or academic careers, we think about investing a lot of time and effort. And basically, the first thought that comes to our mind is a project that can cure cancer. But it doesn't have to be that. Even a smaller involvement or less investment of your time into research can also lead to significant changes in medical care and medical knowledge that we have. So why research? Why pursue it? I think for me, the biggest reason is personal satisfaction. I absolutely love research. It drives me. It makes me wake up in the morning and go to the lab at 5 in the morning, or as Dr. Nam can vouch, stay overnight in the lab working with no one else at the hospital, just doing your thing. I mean, it's just a matter of personal satisfaction. And then a lot of people would argue that taking time off from your clinical career will sort of hamper your growth or will just prolong your training. But I can definitely tell you that it accelerates your academic career. When, at least in the US, when you join academic institutions, a lot of your professional growth or that trajectory from being a junior physician or a lecturer or an assistant professor to a full-time professor depends on your academic profile. And a lot of the work that you do in these early years will actually promote it. For example, an H-index is a metric that's really important, the number of publications, invited talks, and your sort of profile or recognition in the scientific community, they all contribute towards your promotions during your academic career. So whatever time is spent during your early years committing to research, it will come back to pay off in the near future. So when you think about the time that you take off for research, don't think about it going to waste. In the future, you'll accelerate through your academic growth as a faculty, and you'll recover this time. And then the lasting impact on the field of medicine. I think if I personally talk about my experience of talking to all the mentors that I have had who are close to retiring or who have retired right now, I think for them, because they had an academic interest, the biggest satisfaction that they take from their career is the impact that they have had on the field of medicine. Now, coming to you guys who we arranged this whole thing for, I think one of the reasons why you should spend time in research is because things are changing and the pathways towards a residency are changing as well. And with the step one switching to a pass-fail, also virtual interviews, I mean, it's becoming more and more difficult for you to stand out and convince these committees that you're an ideal candidate for their program. And I think that partaking in research and having some publications to show for on your resume could potentially be one of the ways by which you can stand out and become competitive in your residency applications. Now, how can I set myself up for an academic career? I think the most important thing is realize your true passion. I receive emails daily from applicants or people who say that they're interested in research. And then in the 10 minutes that I spend with them over the phone, I come to realize that they're not even interested in the field of study that I am in. Some of them don't even know what I do. So I think the important thing to realize is first of all, realize your true passion. If you're interested, for example, I was talking to a student last night, and she's interested in ENT, and she's super driven. And those are the kind of people that we love to help and mentor. But if you don't know what you want to do in your life, then I cannot guide you and I cannot facilitate your career growth. So first of all, realize what you're truly interested in. And then second, there's no alternate to knowledge. If you want to be an academic in the field and you want to push that field forward, then you need to know the current knowledge. And oftentimes when students come to me or when they engage with other research faculty, on day one, they'll have 10, 15 different ideas, but it turns out that a majority of them have already been done and they're well published on, or they're ideas that are just not feasible. So getting a baseline knowledge of the field that you're interested in or the questions that you want to address will allow you to ask the right questions that are feasible and will allow you to pursue an academic career. And then skills. Without skills, you can't do anything, be it as simple as just learning basic statistical analyses, or be it some simple lab techniques. You need to have skills that will convince your mentors or potential mentors to hire you, to bring you into their team and sort of help guide your career. So skills are very, very important. And what's interesting is that skills is the one asset that no one can ever take away from you. And I think even the journey of a postdoctoral fellowship is about gaining skills, because later as an attending, when you don't have the bandwidth to spend time in the lab, you can use the knowledge of your skills to teach others to do things for you. And then the last thing is experience and finding the right mentors. I think there's no alternate or no other thing that's as important.
We और नहीं आए लेकिन.
Dr. Jabin, could you unmute yourself, please? Thank you. So finding the right mentors. If you find someone who's passionate about the same thing as you, then they will, and if you put in the hard work and the time and effort, then they'll help build you in your academic career. And then lastly, how can I find research opportunities? I mean, this is one of the questions because I tell a lot of postdocs it's probably even more difficult than finding a residency spot, because there's no dedicated path or no structured program for it. So I think what I would recommend is, first of all, find academic leaders in your field of interest. So I was interested in plastic surgery initially and then surgical oncology. So I started doing a basic Google search, or go to PubMed and see who is publishing literature in your field of interest, and then try contacting them. The reason you want to find academic leaders in your field is because you have most to gain from them. They are the experts, they know most about the field, and they will be able to help establish you the most. And number two, they have the most resources. I mean, there's a reason why they're publishing. There's a reason why they have the capacity to do this. It means that they're funded, or they have the support or means to hire folks like you. And then if that doesn't work out, then you reach out to senior alumni who pursued an academic career. In terms of applications, you have to be professional and you have to be focused. Reach out to only alumni who have pursued what you're interested in. I mean, if someone's interested in, let's say, psych or OBGYN or dermatology, and they just reach out to me so they can get a quote unquote research experience, I will probably not be inclined to invest a lot of my time in them. Whereas if someone's interested in surgical oncology and is passionate about the same things that I am trying to pursue in my life, then I basically welcome them and try to facilitate their growth. And then lastly, we are trying to develop a mentorship program which will facilitate mentor-mentee relationship, and hopefully, as Dr. Nate mentioned. So if option A and B fail and try to figure out things for you. So lastly, I would just say, find something you love to do and you'll never work a day in your life. It's all about finding something that you're passionate about and dedicating your life to. And then it takes a village. What you achieve in your life does not happen on your own. You always stand on the shoulders of giants to become a giant. So find your village, find your people, and they'll help you grow. With that, I would like to thank you all for your attention. Interested in reaching out to me, just reach me on Twitter and I'd be more than happy to help address your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amar Javed. We will do the questions after Dr. Khosa and Dr. Faiz Inam have talked. Dr. Khosa?
Thank you so much. So first of all, if somebody could tell me how much time approximately I have for this conversation. You're muted.
We'd like to stop at 11:45 if possible, so we have room for questions. But go ahead and take
Thank you
your
so
time.
much. Thank you. So before I display my PowerPoint, what I would like to request the audience is, how many are residency seekers, so that I can tailor my talk according to your needs. So if the attendees.
So do any of the attendees, we have one, Dr. Aisha Nasir, who raised her hand. I suspect most of these are, I know one of the attendees here is, actually all of them are saying they're, okay. One of them is doing research, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like more than half look like they're residency
All right,
seekers.
so let me then tailor my talk according to you. I have a PowerPoint, I can display it, maybe not. But if you are a residency aspirant, first thing I always ask people is, when they come to a session like this, how many of you have looked at the program and how many of you have actually searched the panelists or the speakers? And very few have done that. So, if you aim at nothing, you will hit it every time. So you have to have an aim, and then you have to align your aim with the speaker or the panelist, so that you know which questions to ask and get the maximum out of the program. If you come into the program, the mentor or the speaker has their own frame of mind, frame of reference. So they are going to be at a different level from what you expect them to be at. So in order to align between the mentor and the mentee, or the speaker and the audience, you have to make sure you come prepared. That's number one. Number two, as a residency aspirant, if you want to do research, you want to connect with somebody who's, number one, well connected. Number two, in a position of influence. Number three, has a research machine ongoing and has contacts and connections with program directors. So you want to create a win-win at multiple levels. Just getting a publication from an individual who does not have a track record of helping people may not help you. So I know people who have hundreds of publications, but the way they operate is they kiss up and they kick down. You do not want such an individual as your mentor. I hope मेरी आवाज नहीं कट रही है. Is my voice clear?
We can hear you well.
Thank you so much. So, I work with such people. I've worked with people who have had more than 500 publications, but they never gave authorship to a research mentee. They never gave authorship to a student. They never even gave authorship to a resident or a fellow. So they just exchange authorship between a professor versus a professor. And so that's how they got 500-600 publications. And, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. Don't fall trapped to that. You have access to internet. Go and search the individual. Go and search their publication. Go and search how many students get authorship. Go and search how many mentoring awards that individual has received. Go and search how many successes that person has created. And it's very easy. You go to PubMed, you search the individual, you look at their co-authors, you look at the students, and then from 3-4 years ago, the people that had worked with them, search that name and you'll know how many matched into residency. since that time, since the time of publication. So that is incumbent upon the research mentee. एक और चीज आपको बताऊं, yes, of course, आप medicine में research करो, medicine के disciplines में research करो, but you have to understand patient data cannot be given out due to IRB, ethics approval. So when people contact the researcher and they say, we can do statistical analysis for you, we can write an abstract for you, we can write a manuscript for you, but that individual cannot hand you over the data because that is prohibited by law. It is illegal. So there are legal ramifications for that. So what I did to bypass that was that all my research now, and last year I published 52 manuscripts, which is 1 a week. All my research was from publicly available data. So going from research in radiology and cardiovascular disease or trauma imaging, I went and I switched gears and I went into gender and racial disparity research in academic disciplines. So I have published gender and racial disparity in academic faculty, residency programs, leadership, national societies, editorial boards of journals, awards, NIH grants. All of that data is publicly available. So I am currently mentoring almost 100 students from Pakistan, from India, from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, from Nepal even. They sit at their home, they collect the data, they get an Excel file, they go and visit websites, how many male professors, how many female professors, how many assistant professors are male, female, associate professors, how many grants they have, how many publications from PubMed publications, citations from Scopus. All these are publicly available sites that offer data. They compile, collect data. On the basis of that, the data, once it is compiled, given to a statistician, each team has 5 students, which I am supervising. Data is compiled, collected, given to a statistician, statistical analysis is done, manuscript is written based on their performance, then they get a publication, they get a letter of reference from me, they apply for residency, they match. These are the students that I have not met and will never meet probably in my life. Majority of the students, when I go to a meeting like Apna or other meetings, even the API meeting, the Indian Physician Association meeting, people come to me and say, we worked with you remotely 4 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago. You gave us a letter of reference. You gave us advice on Skype. At that time, it was Skype. Now it's Zoom. And we matched, and thank you so much. So there are creative ways of doing things. I'm not displaying my PowerPoint and I'm speaking off the top of my head. The reason is because most of you are residency aspirants. So, I wouldn't teach you or talk to you about writing an IRB. I would not talk to you about applying for an NIH grant, because that is not useful at the stage that you are in your career or in your life. I would rather sort of answer questions and remove any confusions you may have. And after that, if there is time, I have a 25-minute PowerPoint slide deck that I can display.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khosa. That makes sense. So we will do questions at the end. We have Dr. Faiz Inam, who is currently starting his, congratulations on starting your residency in neurology. I think it's day 3 for you. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit of your research journey and how that maybe helped with your residency program or in any other way or form as well.
Sure. Thank you. And it was really nice to hear you guys speak. And Amar, it's been a while since we've met in person, so hopefully soon. So my research journey, it started before medical school. Like I got involved. I was fortunate to work with a professor at Aga Khan University at the time. It was in high school. I used to go, there was this Nala next to our high school, and I would go collect water samples from there and then take it to the lab, do PCR to identify the populations in there. So that's kind of when that bug kind of really stuck. And then through medical school, research was off and on. I tried multiple different projects and just things you know, it would be very difficult to actually, my passion was primarily towards lab research and being in, you know, at the bench. Near the end of my PhD, I did, near the end of medical school, I did a bit of clinical work, but primarily lab work was what I wanted to do. And so eventually I did my final year electives in the US in a lab that I was interested in. They were doing biomaterials and neuroregeneration. I eventually applied for the PhD. Getting a PhD, it's getting harder and harder. So people, like Amar said, like people regularly reach out, and it seems like, you know, it's becoming harder. Even this year, there were at least 3 people who I knew personally who applied for a PhD, and one of them got an offer, but the others didn't. And so it's getting difficult. And but I got into fortunately back then I got into the PhD program, and that was just probably, the PhD was probably the most exciting, and also it had its ups and downs and everything, and that just going through that whole process of science was really fulfilling. And I did my PhD there at Georgia Tech, and then our lab moved to Duke University. My PI had become Dean of Engineering over there, and so I finished up over there. And then during the PhD, I got to, you know, fortunately I was in a lab where it was well funded, and so I had a lot more independence. The PI was busy with more administrative stuff, so I was kind of in the beginning. This was really difficult, having someone who was so hands off, because I was a medical student. I was not a scientist as much. But eventually, you know, you become independent, and then I had this freedom to do whatever I wanted. So then I began another project that I really wanted to do myself, and I continued this into a year of postdoc. And because of all this, because of how much I really enjoyed science and how much I knew this is what I want to do, no matter, you know, even though it has its ups and downs, there was just this feeling of, you know, this feeling of being able to work at this edge of the human knowledge. And a lot of my, you know, often you would get negative results and things wouldn't work out, but you're still like there at the edge, and you have this excitement. So I was actually considering whether I should go back into the clinical field or not. And it was during my postdoc that I decided that it probably would be worth going for it, because I realized that even though my PhD, it was in bioengineering, even though, you know, science was really fulfilling, there was a lot of knowledge I got from medical school that I applied to my research and kind of focused my research in particular directions. And so I wanted to get that kind of experience in neurology and neuro-oncology, especially if I'm going towards brain tumors. And then both things I noticed have very different sort of aspects that they fulfill. So science was kind of this, you know, aspirational thing where I'm in the long run, I'm working for something that can, you know, you can hopefully, of course, maybe one day develop a cure or something. But even then, you're still just this feeling of working on the edge of what we know. And you're always just, even though it's a tiny bit, you're just kind of hopefully, you know, making a dent in our human knowledge. And that's just something so fulfilling every time, because it's such a difficult problem, because no one has the answer. So it's such a difficult problem. So whether you find a positive answer or a negative answer, you found something new, and that stays with you. And then medicine, though, on the other hand, provides this other kind of satisfaction where you're actually dealing with patients. So I wanted to kind of also have that as well, to have that kind of day-to-day job as well. I eventually see myself as 80% science, 20% research. But so I applied for research. I applied for neurology. One thing I will say, I don't know how much the PhD helped in the residency. My goal was not, of course, to do the PhD to get into residency. So I'm sure there'll probably be questions about that. I think if you want to do science, you don't need a PhD for sure. There's amazing scientists. All of you guys are amazing scientists. You don't need a PhD to do anything. There's, especially even, you know, lab work and everything, you don't need a PhD. But that said, I think a PhD adds a lot of value if you're really passionate about science, and you definitely want to have a lab, and you really want to get into the thick of it. I think a PhD does give you a sort of perspective, or kind of throws you deep into the jungle, and you have to find your way out and grow and become an independent thinker that way. That said, again, you don't need it, but it's just it's a good structure. It's a good method to get there. Yeah.
So thank you, Dr. Nam. So just to give perspective to the graduates or students or other people who are attending, research is, so we have Dr. Amar, Javed, and Dr. Inam who are doing research as a career option, and both seeking clinical careers within the research or after, and then probably going back to research as their major part of the career. So talking about a researcher, physician, or in our professional academic work, you will be called the research scholars. And where majority of your time is dedicated to research. Dr. Kosa gave us a really good example of the other option where people are more clinicians and may have done some research. The reason we're doing this talk is also because in general, medical graduates from the US, the American medical graduates, have opportunity of research from the get-go. Starts in high school, carries on into their undergraduate, and then into medical school. In fact, we have, for Dr. Inam, we have MD, PhD programs in the US, right? Where you're doing a medical degree and PhD together. So it's a longer medical college time. So I think whoever wants to pursue research in one form or the other has to decide if you're from the get-go, you may decide that you want to be a scientist like Dr. Inam, or you may decide after the fact because you fall in love with it, or you may decide to learn this as a skill, because even if you are not going to end up being a researcher and you're going to be a good clinician, having those skills bring curiosity and make you into a better clinician. So with that, I want to ask Dr. Noman Ashraf and Dr. Mohammad Siddiq Khurram before we get to questions, and even Dr. Wahid. Did you have any research background, whether it's quality improvement or clinical research or basic science research, before you came to the US? How about Dr. Ashraf?
Ji, Assalamu alaikum. So, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, not the background before I came to the US. I have done a lot of quality research after I have been here, but not really like in the medical school. We were not exposed to it a lot. And then once I came here, then I got involved in research after that. So, but if we can talk about some quality research, what we do now, since I've been involved in this like leading the program. So try to find out things that are easier for our residents, which I can say some of the applicants who are applying, they can also sort of get involved on those. Simple things. Suppose these days the main topic has been the improving wellness and burnouts. So we take one of those components. Surveys have always been like sort of the low-hanging fruits for, I think, that are easier for people to get involved into and get the credit, get the project accomplished. So you design a survey, you can do it with existing either residents there, some medical students who are rotating through the survey, and interdisciplinary. So these are the projects that you can start on, and then you can multiply those. So easier to sort of accomplish, and then you can finish them, and then easier to present as well as a trainee. So those are some of the things that I think for them it'll be easy to get involved to start off. But if there's a specific question, yes, I can. I've done those type of surveys a lot with the residents recently that I can talk about.
You have to unmute, Dr. Jamshed.
I'm so sorry. Dr. Ashraf, were you taught those skills during your residency program?
For the quality improvement project? So what had happened So what had happened, it's kind of a mix. So when I got here, the time was, by the time I got my results of the CS, it was already, I think, the January, February. So I was losing that year of the match process. So what I did, I got into a research observership at NYU, and that's where I started learning some of those skills. And also there was a clinical research going on, so I got exposed to that too. So that's the first time when I started learning about those skills. And then during the residency, since there's a requirement that you have to do some sort of scholarly activity, so that's when I was exposed at NYU with the clinical research and the quality research. So yeah, picked it up mostly during the training, but yes, a little bit before that while I was preparing for my match and for step 3 here.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Khurram, did you have any research experience, or are you doing anything right now?
So no, Dr. Jamshed, actually, I did not have before starting my residency, no research experience. I had no idea about it. But by second year and third year, I started to publish a lot. And then by the end of like it, within 2 to 3 years, I published so much. I had so much citations within just those 3 years that I filed for my green card. We went through my research that I did not have to get any sponsors or anything. So the point what I was trying to make here that like Aman said, no background from medical school, no mentorship or anything, but still when there's a will, there's a way. So if you want to do something just in 2 to 3 years, what I achieved, I feel like it was quite something, only because at that time I got the guidance and the mentorship was pretty late in my career, I would say, but still it worked out very well. As of currently, another students that reach out to me, I arrange multiple observerships in pathology, also through our website too. We have about 35 applicants at this time for observership research. I'm mentoring many of them and arranging some other observerships and research with them too. So currently I am involved with many students on different projects, let it be case reports, quality assurance things and whatnot. About the quality assurance projects, again, that was a requirement during the residency. So that part, it all depends, I think, what kind of program you are in. So like my hospital was a community hospital, so there was not much research. Still, with the seniors' help, I was able to publish a lot. But I guess depending on which program you are in, academic versus community, the resources may vary.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Khurram. Dr. Waheed?
Specific, I have a lot of stories, but I want to go in because I know there's not that much of a time, so I'd spare those for a later day. But I actually got interested in research back in medical school and started back then. At the end of the second year, we used to have this, after the second or first prof part 2, there was this period of time off, and there was this like huge push what I would say peer pressure that people were looking to do research, and I had no idea. So that's the first time I got exposed to, around that time I ended up coming to Tulane University in New Orleans. That's where I ended up having my first solid experience of research. So I worked in the Department of Biochemistry with Dr. Samuel Landry. And that was my first experience. And that actually opened my mind. At some point in my career, I considered to do a PhD actually right after graduating, but things changed as I went into clinical years, and I got attracted again more towards family medicine, community medicine, general medicine, and it's been a long journey to get where I am, and I've gone lots of ups and downs. But yes, I had large exposure during medical school, and actually the Aga Khan University Students Research Forum. It was Fawad Islam from my class. And I who founded that. And I've continued, and I love doing that stuff even now.
Thank you, Dr. Waheed. So I think the point is that research can both be a career option. It can lead to being a scientist. It can be lead to PhDs, but it's also a skill set that I think should almost be should not be an exception. it is a skill that we should have so that at any point we need it or we need to understand it, even in our clinical practice, we have that skill. So we're going to go to some questions. Dr. Yushe Jawad has a question about wanting to look for a research position, but due to COVID, there's been a lot of freeze. Can you tell me how are things with respect to visa, or what is a good way to approach researchers over email? So I think I'll let Dr. Amar and then Dr. Khosa answer these questions. Any guidance for graduates who are actually seeking research for now? Dr. Javed? Dr. Javed, you're mute.
Yep. So I think that's a great question.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, the insights.
We can't hear you, Dr. Amar. There's some issues with the mic. I'll let Dr. Khosa answer the question and then until you can fix the mic. Go ahead, Dr. Khosa.
Thank you so much. So, pehli cheez to, you are not in a unique situation. COVID is affecting everybody. So all international medical graduates are affected. What you have to creatively think is, of course, visa problems are there, observerships are not being offered, electives are not being offered, research positions are not being offered. Sitting where you are, how can you maximize your chances? How can you have a mentor who can remotely mentor you? So as Warren Buffett famously said, be greedy when people are careful and be careful when people are greedy. So you have to sort of think outside the box. Don't think of your limitations, because every set of limitation also comes with a set of opportunities. And every set of opportunity comes with a set of limitations. So while yes, you are thinking or focusing on limitations that you cannot travel, you cannot, work in person, you cannot appear in interview in person, think about the opportunity that has created for you, because now remote mentoring and remote research like this remote session that we are doing is the new norm. So don't get fixated in yesterday. As I said, all my research projects, just give you an example, all my research projects are remote. All mentees sitting in their house in Pakistan and India, in Bangladesh, in Nepal, in Sri Lanka collect data. Last year, as I said, we published 52 manuscripts. There were over 100 students that I mentored. All of those that were mentored and got a publication will get a letter of reference. Now, when COVID is under control and people are able to travel and come and appear in person for research jobs, I'll be their referee. Whether they are applying for residency or whether they're applying for a research job, a physician in North America will vouch for their work ethic and will send the PubMed link of the publication in the letter of reference. So focus on the opportunities, and there are endless of those. Thank you so much. I hope I've answered the question.
Thank you, Dr. Khosa. We'll get back to Dr. Javed. If you can connect.
Yes. So basically, what I was saying was that if you have the right profile, even with COVID, I think things are opening back up again. Things are looking back towards going to the normal. We brought in 2 postdocs over the last month. Both of them are international graduates. So it is still possible. If you find the right people, if you have the right profile, then people will do that. And then secondly, I agree with Dr. Khosa. You have to look for alternates as well. I mean, if there is an issue or we are in this unique sort of situation, there are always going to be alternate options. And one thing that I would like to mention is that there are great research scientists and academics in Pakistan as well. Don't ever forget that. There are great scientists and physicians at all our institutions, some of whom who have gone back after training from the US, or even those who established their careers. I mean, I can think of some of my mentors during medical school who basically lit the fire in me. And if you don't have the opportunity to come to the US, you can work with them and gain the skill set that is required. And sort of, as Dr. Kosa mentioned, start building your profile in academics. So there are a lot of alternate pathways. Look into that. And if the US option doesn't work out, that's not the end of the world.
Thank you, Dr. Javed. I totally agree with that. We recently had, there's a question for Dr. Waheed, and I wanted to start with, we recently had a webinar on residency pathway to internal medicine, and the topic of research came up. And there's actually NRMP data on the comparison of international medical graduates versus American graduates and how much research they have. In internal medicine, the number of research, well, I should say publications and research skills and opportunities are almost double for American graduates. So 2 for IMGs and 4 for internal medicine. In surgery, it's very different. And that's why, you know, with Dr. Javed's interest in surgery and Dr. Inam in neurology, it's different. So each specialty has its own sort of comparison, if I may say, or benefit of clinical research skills. So the question is for Dr. Waheed, of course, is there any benefit of research skills or experience in family medicine?
There are many ways to look at this question. First approach is looking for data. Somebody published an article in 2010 that looks at interest in research from the local US MDs and US DO students, and it's inversely proportional to matching with family medicine. So people who had research interest, they tended to go into other specialties than family medicine. And there was a large debate about like program directors, how should we market our programs, whether we should have. And then there's other aspect of looking at the ACGME putting a lot more emphasis on scholarly activity and requiring each family medicine resident to have at least two scholarly activities. Out of those 2, at least one has to be a quality improvement project in order to graduate. So that's a large pressure, and not having enough scholarly activity among residents and faculty is one of the most common citations that family medicine programs face. About 21% of the programs, according to 2012, and it continues to be a problem. So there are 2 challenges: how the programs are going to market themselves to the local graduates, and then how they're going to maintain their scholarly activity requirements and maintain accreditation. Now, then the third thing comes, how do most program directors family medicine program directors look at research among the applicants to the family medicine residency programs? So you have to look at the value that the applicant is going to bring in total as a package. So somebody who has done some analytical work, I personally pay a lot of attention, and I know that the person has gained skills that are going to be useful in taking care of patients and going into the quadruple aim or triple aim of care, which includes value-based care. And value-based care is not possible until you answer the question of quality of care, right? So quality of care cannot be done until you have some analytical skills. So each physician is expected to do more and more analytical tasks at population health level going in future. So it is important for most program directors to see some analytical skills among the applicants. So no matter whether a program is geared towards research or not, there's importance, but it has to be put in perspective.
Thank you very much for saying that the context is important. So Dr. Naman, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I totally agree with the comments made. Just wanted to add that research, whether it's a small or big, you want to have it if you get a chance on your CV, because you may think it's not a significant area where you work, but it tells us a lot as program directors. It tells us that you have teamwork, ethics, you can work in a bigger setup, you have professionalism, you have organizational skills, you have analytical thinking. So there's a lot of other things that we can gather from that. And then if you, as Dr. Kosa said, if you work with your mentor and you did a good job, your mentor is definitely going to add that to the letter of recommendation. When I review letter of recommendation, those are very generic ones. And even when we write, we are writing like, I don't know, 50, 60 for medical students a year, and then I don't know how many for other trainees. So you can't come up with new material. It's like the same letter, and when we read, we can tell. But if you have done something significant, like say research, you've spent time with someone, then that's going to show up. And that's where your CV starts looking different. So even if you do not have a product, but you're part of the process, it's still important because they will mention it. There was a seminar recently done by one of our YPC member, Dr. Sadiq Naveed. He did it for the NISHTRA chapter, but I think we have a link and we posted. Excellent webinar for anyone to watch if you want to get involved and start with like a basic level case report, literature review, and you can build on your skills, but those are the easy ones you can start off. And if you need, again, you let us know. We'll try to find mentors for you. And I think that would be the good way to get involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much for pointing that out, Dr. Ashraf, that one of the things that has been lacking when I have talked to students who have actually are already doing some research is they don't understand their role. And if they do know their role, they do not explain that on their CV. What is it that you're doing? Are you collecting data? Are you the coordinator? Are you doing active basic science research? What skills are you learning? And those are extremely important. And based on what they say, it tells us exactly what Dr. Nauman Ashraf said is, are you a good team player? You know, are you a learner? Are you curious? So it's not just about doing research, it's about how that research helps you and how you mature. And then we will definitely reach out to Dr. Sadiq Naveed, and if he allows us to and gives us permission, we'll post that on our website. Dr. Javed, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I would just like to add one more thing to what Dr. Ashraf said. Getting a research experience is important, but passion is important, because if you work with someone and your CV reads that you spent 6 months working with a mentor, but there are no publications to support that effort, that can actually reflect negatively towards your profile. Yes, it's great to be invested in this time and might show that you're a team player, but you need tangible evidence on your resume to support that during your experience, you were a productive part of the team.
Thank you for pointing that out. And I think Dr. Kosa would probably speak to that as well. Dr. Kosa?
Thank you so much. So I absolutely agree with every word that has been said so far. And I'm sure Dr. Javed would agree that we get resumes where people have 25 abstracts and not a single publication. That shows that you take something but can never complete it. So please, you know, and I get CVs and I'm like, who gave you this idea? And they say, we got it from another CV. So, you know, you have to be careful, because ignorance is not a blessing. What you don't know will definitely hurt you. So it is better to get advice, take advice. दूसरी एक और चीज मैं आपको बताऊं, ये अभी बात हो रही है family medicine वाली. You know, this is what I have seen when people have done gender and racial disparity research with me. Their entire interview is actually based on the project. Time and again, people, when they appear in the interview, because you are a person of color, you are a racial minority, you are a religious minority, आप मुसलमान हो, आप female हो, आप color, you have a color, you are international medical graduate. Most of the interviews, when especially females of color, when they come and they tell me about their interview, or after matching, they tell me, you know, that they've matched, and we have this conversation, they say most of our interview was on the publication that we did, whether that was neurosurgery or family medicine or anesthesia or dermatology, because they said, how did you conceive this idea? It not only matches your professional, for example, family medicine में आपने apply किया तो family medicine का gender race का project था, बल्कि आपकी personal profile को भी 100% वो project match करता है. So it is a match on multiple levels, and it immensely benefits the applicants when they go in. Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kosa. Well, thank you everyone for your time. We're going to end here. It has been a long day for all of you. We appreciate you staying with us. I hope the participants learned something new. And if you, again, need to reach out to any of the panelists and speakers, please reach out to us at ypc@appna.org, and we will forward your query. We want to emphasize that our goal this year is to develop you and mature you in skills that make you a better clinician, physician, researcher, but also a good student, a learner for lifelong time. The focus should be that you should feel confident when you're sending your application and you're interviewing, whether it's an application for a research position or it's an application for a residency position, that you're confident that you have put out your very best. And we would like to help you create these opportunities not after graduation, but before graduation. You want to start in medical school. For Pakistani graduates, I can't speak for other international medical graduates, we are very young when we are doing A-levels and FSC. Some of us are mature enough to understand, maybe like Dr. Inam, that we want to do research, and some of you may have done that. I did not. But others may have that opportunity and may start in medical school. So we hope that you will take these talks, and I hope some medical students are listening, and that you start looking for these opportunities and developing your skills in medical school so that we're not playing catch up after you graduate. Okay, so thank you very much for all your time. We will edit the recording and post it as soon as possible. Have a good day and the rest of the weekend. Thank you very much.